The gallery opening was supposed to be my triumph. After months of preparation, my photography exhibition was finally launching at the Downtown Arts Center in Portland. I'd been documenting urban decay and renewal, capturing the stories hidden in abandoned buildings and forgotten neighborhoods. The wine was flowing, people were actually buying prints, and for once I felt like maybe I'd made something that mattered. My son Marcus had been helping me all evening, carrying my camera equipment and charming the visitors with his shy smile. At 12, he was old enough to appreciate art but young enough to still think his mom was cool. We'd been through hell together over the past year, and seeing him relaxed and happy felt like medicine. I was talking to a potential buyer about a series I'd shot in the old industrial district when my phone buzzed. Marcus calling, strange since he was supposed to be in the back room organizing my portfolio prints. I excused myself and stepped into the hallway. "Mom, you need to leave right now." His voice was barely above a whisper, but I could hear the fear in it. My stomach dropped. "What's wrong? Where are you?" "I'm hiding in the storage closet. Grandma Jean and Uncle Paul are here. They brought someone with them, a man in a suit." "They're looking for you?" Jean was my ex-husband Derek's mother, and Paul was his brother. I hadn't seen them since the divorce proceedings ended 6 months ago. The custody battle had been vicious, and Derek had lost badly after the judge heard about his drinking and the incident with the broken lamp that had sent Marcus to the emergency room with cuts on his arm. "What are they doing here?" "They're talking to the gallery owner." "The man has papers, official looking. Grandma Jean is crying and saying you kidnapped me, that you're unstable. Uncle Paul is backing her up. Mom, they have a police officer with them." My hands started shaking. Derek had been making noise about appealing the custody decision, but I thought his family had finally accepted it was over. "Stay where you are, I'm coming to get you." I hung up and tried to think. The main entrance was blocked. They'd see me coming, but there was a service exit near the storage room where Marcus was hiding. I grabbed my purse and slipped through the crowd, smiling and nodding like nothing was wrong. The service hallway was dimly lit and smelled like cleaning supplies. I found the storage closet and tapped softly. Marcus emerged, clutching his backpack. His face was pale, but his jaw was set with determination that reminded me of myself at his age. "The back door," I whispered. "We'll take the fire escape." We made it to my car without being seen. As I started the engine, I could see police lights reflecting off the gallery windows. My beautiful opening night, the first good thing that had happened to us in months, was being destroyed by people who couldn't let go of their need to control us. "Where are we going?" Marcus asked as I pulled into traffic. "Somewhere safe while I figure this out." But even as I said it, I realized how few options we had. My own family lived 3,000 miles away in Boston. Most of our friends were connected to the art community, and Derek's family had money and influence in Portland. They could make my life very difficult if they wanted to. The story of how we'd gotten here was long and complicated, but it started with me being the kind of person who always tried to fix things. Growing up as the middle child in a chaotic household in South Boston, I'd learned early that keeping the peace was safer than making waves. My older brother Tommy was the rebel who got all the attention, good and bad. My younger sister Kate was the baby who got all the protection. I was the responsible one, the mediator, the one who cleaned up everyone else's messes. When I met Derek in college, he seemed like the opposite of my family's drama. Quiet, studious, from a respectable family with money and connections. His mother, Jean, treated me like a project, constantly suggesting ways I could improve myself, dress better, speak more softly. I thought it meant she cared. Derek and I married young, and I threw myself into being the perfect wife. I gave up my photography dreams to support his career in finance. When Marcus was born, I became the perfect mother too, organizing playdates and volunteering at school while Derek worked longer and longer hours. The drinking started gradually. A few beers after work became a bottle of wine with dinner became something harder when he thought I wasn't looking. His family made excuses. The job was stressful. Men needed to unwind. I was being too sensitive. Then came the night when 5-year-old Marcus accidentally knocked over Derek's laptop while playing. Derek exploded, throwing a heavy glass lamp that shattered against the wall. A shard caught Marcus on the arm and blood soaked through his pajamas as I rushed him to the hospital. The emergency room doctor asked careful questions. Marcus was quiet and withdrawn, clinging to me. When Derek showed up drunk and belligerent, demanding to know why I'd brought the boy to the hospital for a little scratch, I knew we were done. But leaving wasn't simple. Derek's family had resources and connections I couldn't match. They hired expensive lawyers and painted me as an unstable woman who was alienating their son from his father. The custody battle dragged on for months. draining my savings and my spirit. The breakthrough came when Marcus finally found the courage to tell the judge what had really happened that night. Derek's lawyer tried to discredit him, but 12-year-old boys don't lie about being afraid of their fathers. The judge awarded me full custody with supervised visitation only. Derek's family never forgave me for taking their grandson away. They'd been escalating their harassment for months, showing up at Marcus's school, calling my clients to spread rumors about my mental health, even hiring a private investigator to follow us around. Now they were trying a new tactic. False accusations, official-looking papers, uniformed officers. They wanted to make me look like a kidnapper, a woman so unstable she'd flee with her child rather than face the truth. I drove aimlessly through the Portland streets trying to think. Marcus sat quietly beside me, occasionally giving directions when I asked which way to turn. Finally, I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour diner on the east side. "Can you tell me exactly what you heard?" I asked. Marcus took a deep breath. "I was organizing your prints like you asked. The door to the main gallery was open a crack, and I heard Grandma Jean's voice. She was talking to someone about how you'd violated the custody agreement by taking me out of state. But we never left Oregon." "I know, but she was saying you'd taken me to California for some photography workshop last month, that you were planning to disappear with me. The man with her was writing everything down." I remembered that workshop. It had been in Eugene, barely 2 hours south of Portland. Marcus had come with me because it was during his spring break, and we'd made a weekend of it, visiting the coast and taking pictures together. "She said you were mentally unstable from the divorce, that you'd been drinking heavily and neglecting me, that I was afraid to speak up because you'd threatened me." My hands clenched around the steering wheel. Every accusation was either a complete lie or a twisted version of something innocent. The photography workshop became fleeing the state. My occasional glass of wine with dinner became heavy drinking. Marcus's loyalty to me became fear and coercion. Uncle Paul was there too. He was telling the police officer that Derek was a devoted father who just wanted his son back, that the family was worried about my mental health and thought I might hurt myself or you. The sophistication of it took my breath away. They weren't just making random accusations. They'd crafted a narrative that hit all the right notes: unstable mother, devoted father, child in danger. They'd probably been planning this for weeks. "What do we do now?" Marcus asked. I looked at my son, this brave kid who'd hidden in a closet to warn me, who'd testified in court to protect us both, who was sitting calmly in a diner parking lot at 10 o'clock at night because his grandmother wanted to destroy his mother. "We fight back," I said. "But first, we need help." I called Alina, my lawyer, and left a message explaining what had happened. Then I called my friend Sarah, who lived across town and had always said we could crash at her place if we needed to. She answered on the second ring, and when I explained the situation, she didn't hesitate. "Come over now. I'll make up the couch." Sarah lived in a small apartment in the Hawthorne district, surrounded by coffee shops and vintage stores. She was a social worker who specialized in family crisis intervention, and she'd been through her own custody battle years earlier. When she opened the door, she took one look at us and pulled us both into a hug. "They can't just show up with fake papers and expect to take Marcus," she said after I'd explained everything. "There are procedures, legal requirements. If they really had grounds for an emergency custody change, they'd have to go through the court system. But what if they convince someone that I'm dangerous? What if they get a judge to sign an order based on their lies? That's why we document everything. Every interaction, every lie, every attempt at harassment. You're going to need evidence when this goes to court." Over the next few days, the true scope of their campaign became clear. Derek's family had been busy. They'd contacted Marcus's school, claiming I'd been acting erratically at pickup. They'd called my clients, suggesting I was unreliable and possibly unstable. They'd even reached out to my landlord, implying I might be a problem tenant. But they'd made mistakes too. The school had records showing I'd never acted inappropriately. My clients had contracts and correspondence proving my professionalism. My landlord had months of on-time rent payments and no complaints. Most importantly, they'd underestimated Marcus. At 12, he was old enough to understand what was happening and articulate his own feelings. When the court-appointed child advocate interviewed him, he was clear and consistent. He wanted to stay with me, he felt safe with me, and he was afraid of his father's family's attempts to separate us. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Derek's family hired a different lawyer this time, someone who specialized in emergency custody cases. They painted a picture of a desperate woman who'd fled with her child, who was living in unstable housing, who was too focused on her art career to properly care for her son. But Alina was ready for them. She had documentation of every lie, every harassment attempt, every violation of the existing custody order. She had testimony from Marcus's teachers, my clients, even the gallery owner who'd witnessed Jean's disruption of my opening night. And she had Marcus himself, who testified via closed-circuit television to protect him from the stress of facing his father's family directly. He spoke clearly about his life with me, about feeling safe and supported, about his fear of being forced to live with people who tried to separate him from his mother. The judge was not impressed with Derek's family's tactics. She found no evidence of instability or neglect, and plenty of evidence of harassment and false accusations. She not only maintained the existing custody arrangement, but also issued a restraining order preventing Jean and Paul from contacting Marcus or me directly. Derek himself never showed up to court. Later, we learned he'd been arrested for drunk driving the week before the hearing. His family's claims about his devoted fatherhood became harder to maintain when he was sitting in jail. The months that followed were quieter but not peaceful. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next attack. Marcus started having nightmares again. My photography career, which had been building momentum before the gallery incident, stalled as I dealt with legal bills and emotional exhaustion. But slowly, we began to rebuild. I started taking on smaller projects, building back my reputation one client at a time. Marcus joined the school photography club and discovered he had his own eye for composition and light. Sarah became like family to us, a steady presence who understood what we'd been through. The real turning point came almost a year later, when Derek's brother Paul reached out through Alina. Derek had been in and out of rehab, and the family was finally acknowledging that their campaign against me might have been misguided. Paul wanted to meet to apologize, to see if there was a way forward that didn't involve lawyers and restraining orders. I was skeptical, but Alina thought it might be worth hearing what he had to say. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown, with Alina present to keep things professional. Paul looked older than I remembered, tired and defeated. He started by apologizing for the gallery incident, for the lies his mother had told, for the months of harassment that had followed. "We were so angry," he said. "Derek was falling apart and we blamed you for everything. We thought if we could just get Marcus back, Derek would get his life together. And now Derek's in his third rehab program in 2 years. Mom's health is failing from the stress. We've spent a fortune on lawyers and private investigators, and for what? Marcus is happy with you. Anyone can see that." I didn't respond immediately. Part of me wanted to accept his apology, to find a way to move forward without the constant fear and conflict. But another part of me remembered the terror in Marcus's voice that night at the gallery, the months of looking over our shoulders, the way my son had learned to be afraid of his own family. "What exactly are you proposing?" Alina asked. "We want to drop all legal challenges, no more custody fights, no more harassment. In exchange, maybe Marcus could see his grandmother occasionally. She's not well and she misses him." I looked at Paul, trying to read his sincerity. "What about Derek? Derek needs to get sober first, really sober, not just between relapses. Until then, he's not part of any discussion about Marcus." It wasn't everything I wanted, but it was more than I'd expected. The idea of Marcus having some connection to his father's family on controlled terms wasn't necessarily bad. Jean had been manipulative and destructive, but she'd also been a grandmother who'd lost access to her grandson. Maybe there was a way to rebuild that relationship without putting Marcus at risk. "I'll need to talk to Marcus about this," I said, "and any contact would have to be supervised, at least initially." Paul nodded. "We understand. We just want a chance to make things right." The conversation with Marcus was difficult. He was old enough to understand the complexity of family relationships, but he was also still hurt and angry about what had happened. We talked about forgiveness, about the difference between forgiving someone and trusting them, about the possibility of having a relationship with his grandmother that didn't involve his father. In the end, Marcus decided he was willing to try. We started with phone calls, then supervised visits at Sarah's apartment. Jean was different than I remembered, more fragile and less commanding. The months of conflict had taken their toll on her too. The first few visits were awkward, but gradually, Marcus and Jean began to rebuild their relationship. She told him stories about his father's childhood, showed him old photo albums, taught him to make the chocolate chip cookies she'd made for Derek when he was young. It wasn't the same as before, but it was something. Derek remained in the background, a shadow figure who occasionally sent cards or gifts through his mother. Marcus was curious about his father, but not ready for direct contact. I respected that boundary, even when Jean hinted that Derek was doing better, that he was sober and working on himself. 2 years after the gallery incident, I had my second solo exhibition, this time at a larger venue in downtown Portland. The theme was resilience, and it featured photographs of people and places that had survived trauma and emerged stronger. There was a series on abandoned buildings being converted into community centers, portraits of domestic violence survivors who'd rebuilt their lives, images of neighborhoods coming together after natural disasters. Marcus, now 14, had contributed several photographs to the exhibition. His work was raw and powerful, capturing the perspective of a young person who'd learned too early about the complexity of family loyalty and the necessity of self-protection. The opening night was everything the first one should have been. Friends and colleagues celebrated with us, critics praised the work, and several pieces sold to collectors. But the most meaningful moment came when Jean arrived, walking slowly but steadily, carrying a small bouquet of flowers. She'd asked Paul to bring her, and I'd agreed after discussing it with Marcus. She stood in front of one of his photographs for a long time, tears streaming down her face. It was a portrait of an old tree that had been struck by lightning but continued to grow, its scarred trunk supporting new branches reaching toward the sky. "He has your eye," she said to me quietly, "but he has Derek's sensitivity too, from before the drinking." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. It was the first time she'd acknowledged Derek's problems without making excuses or shifting blame. That night after the gallery closed and the last guests had left, Marcus and I sat in the empty space surrounded by our photographs. Sarah had gone home, but she'd left behind a bottle of champagne and a note that said, "For surviving and thriving." "Do you think Dad will ever get better?" Marcus asked. It was a question he'd been asking in different ways for years, and I'd never known how to answer it. The truth was complicated. Derek was an alcoholic who'd hurt us both, but he was also Marcus's father and a person struggling with his own demons. "I don't know," I said finally, "but I know that whether he gets better or not, we're going to be okay. We've learned how to protect ourselves and how to build something good from the pieces we have left." Marcus nodded, understanding more than a 14-year-old should have to. "I'm glad we didn't give up." "Me too." As we packed up the remaining photographs and prepared to leave, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. The gallery incident had been terrifying, but it had also been a catalyst. It had forced me to stop trying to manage other people's emotions and start protecting what mattered most. It had taught Marcus that he could trust his instincts and speak up when something was wrong. It had shown us both that family isn't just about blood relations, but about the people who show up when you need them most. Derek's family had tried to destroy us because they couldn't accept that their version of family was toxic. But in the end, their attempts to tear us apart had only made us stronger. We'd learned to recognize manipulation, to set boundaries, to choose our own definition of what family meant. The photographs on the gallery walls told stories of resilience, but they were also our story. We'd been broken by people who claimed to love us, but we'd refused to stay broken. We'd found new ways to grow, new people to trust, new dreams to pursue. As we walked out into the Portland night, Marcus's hand briefly touched mine. He was too old for hand-holding, but the gesture said everything that needed to be said. We'd survived the worst they could throw at us, and we'd built something beautiful from the wreckage. The future was uncertain, as it always is. Derek might get sober, or he might not. Jean might continue to rebuild her relationship with Marcus, or she might revert to her old patterns. There would be other challenges, other people who might try to hurt us or control us. But we'd learned the most important lesson of all. We could trust ourselves to recognize danger and protect each other. We'd learned that love isn't about sacrifice and submission, but about mutual respect and support. We'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from people who refuse to treat you with dignity. The gallery lights dimmed behind us as we walked toward our car, toward home, toward whatever came next. We were ready for it all,